Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Anonymous. Song name, Flesh Pierced by the Blades of Triniton, Eyes Devoured by Vulth Suidarl, The Giant Fly by Esoctrilihum. I look forward to your reaction. You know, with a title like that, I'm sure you do look forward to my reaction. This is probably going to be... Or look at that. Look at that artwork. This is either going to be really dark folk or really aggressive metal. I don't really think there's any room in between. Let's dive into this and see what Esoctrilihum is bringing to the table today. It's very busy. There's a lot going on and there is not enough room for it. In the mix, at least compositionally, there's plenty of space. I get the feeling that it's supposed to be scary in a sense, but the previous section's fluidity made it feel really soothing. alongside the heaviness. Like a bee buzzing in my ear. The screaming's also been displaced to the side now. And more just drones. Not necessarily a bee buzzing this time, but still just a sonic drone. I don't know if this worked. Okay, so let me start from the top of my thoughts and we'll kind of work our way down and see where this takes us. I am going to touch on some more objective ideas later in the video, but right now I just want to approach this as art. What are its intentions? What is it trying to say? And does it accomplish saying them? I believe the idea here is to create some sort of hellish landscape. Generally, there is a feeling of heaviness, of weight, of darkness, of intensity throughout this track. And the other thing that's paired often with that is screaming. Not musical screaming, though we do get some harsh vocals in here, but more of anguished screaming. Less musical, more raw emotion. I believe this is supposed to be a track describing torture, mutilation. I mean, the title of the track says as much. Does it work? I think from that perspective, yes, I clearly got those intentions across, but you may have noticed I chuckled a little bit in here too. As with a lot of extremity, whether you're looking at something absurdist or something that is trying to sell a very extreme idea, such as this, being tortured, there's a buy-in, right? There's a hurdle that has to be crossed over by the audience in order to say, I'm here for this. I'm accepting this fictional art to have a real component to it. Another way you may have heard this is the suspension of disbelief, that when that is broken, you now disbelieve what you're hearing or seeing or whatever art you're engaging with. And in the middle of the track, though, my suspension of disbelief was broken. And I no longer took it at face value. It was too absurd, too extreme. And I stopped buying into it. For whatever reason, up to that point, I was like, okay, I get it. This is what this is. We have someone who's being tortured. The music aligns with that. The vocal delivery aligns with that. Okay, and then something just stopped working for me about 5 minutes in, and it just became absurd, comical, too overdone. They lost me. Now, granted, this is subjective. Other people may not even buy into the first 30 seconds and find it ridiculous. Some people will get all the way to the end and absolutely buy into the entire work of art. But for me, it lost me there in the middle. And I think it's interesting too that around this point, the music stopped being as heavy. I don't know if this was just my perspective on it, or, I mean, I do have some technical data to back this up. I do think the song lightens up towards the end of the track. It really does hit a peak between like minutes 3 and 5, maybe. But the song just never caught me again. And it's not that I didn't give it an opportunity to, it just, I never bought back in. There's also another really interesting part to this though. The song is supposed to represent a personal hell. A torturing, whether this is a true afterlife style hell or just somebody in a really dire real life situation, maybe at the hands of, a serial murderer or something. The song doesn't convey this well. I mean, I mentioned that it got its point across, right? I understood it to be that. But the more that I thought about the beginning of this track, You kind of watch my body language listening to it. It's more of a fluid movement I had with it. There was a lot of groove in that opening, and towards the end of the track, I mean, just solid groove, heavier groove. Went for more headbanging than, a flowy movement in that final segment. This is a fun song to listen to, rhythmically at least, pushing aside some of the production value on it. And some of the weight in some of these sections. We definitely have more aggressive black metal-esque moment in this track, but there's several sections on this that are just kind of, they flow, they have groove, they don't feel antagonistic at all. Chordally, yeah, but rhythmically, atmospherically, I don't know, it's kind of contentious it gets at a point. I find that to be a really interesting combination there. Does that make the terror of it lesser? Does it weaken that element? I think so for me, yes, but I don't know that that is going to be something universal. But I did find it not as off-putting because it was so groovy, because it's so easy to just move your body to. I found that to be a really interesting component of it. And I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know how I will feel about it. I think that's the way I want to put it. Because right now I do feel that it diminishes some of the more terrifying and antagonistic elements of it. But maybe that's what they wanted too. We've certainly listened to black metal that is terror focused. Everything about it is creating an ominous atmosphere and an intensity and antagonism in the music to the listener to convey the darkness of the music. This doesn't, though. I don't know if it's purposeful or unintentional, but regardless, it kind of feels less like a solid thriller film, or maybe even less that I'm actually witnessing this, and more like a good C flick, a bit of a low budget horror film where part of the buy-in is that it is low budget. You know that the effects aren't going to be real, and you know that if you took it seriously, you probably wouldn't enjoy yourself that much, and you would definitely lose the buy-in. But because all parties are accepting of what this is, it's fine that it's a little odd or quirky in places. And I think this song fits that really well. It is a bit over the top in some places, and it is not going for a completely serious sound, at least from my perspective. Again, I'm curious if anybody else feels that the groove and fluidity of this diminishes the terrifying elements. So I mean, this is the end of my subjective area here, but I do find this to be a really interesting track here that kind of subverts some of my expectations, particularly where we started. The song kicks off and I'm like, oh, dang, we just got some black metal, maybe some Black and Death in here. But as we went on, it kind of grew on me. Not something I think I'd go out of my way to listen to, but it wasn't what I thought it was given those opening bars. Moving on to something a bit more objective, the production on this is rough. I mentioned at the beginning that there was a lot going on. Honestly, it was only like 4 ideas plus a rhythmic thing underneath it. Honestly, most production styles, most sound spheres could accommodate that. This one couldn't because it's so compressed, so small. Part of that is a positive. It creates this unique characteristic for it and creates something that feels claustrophobic. The sound is almost too large. There's an immense fuzziness to it that sounds like it's pushing against the sound sphere and just wants to shatter it, but it can't. It really creates something that feels particular, of a specific space for someone who is presumably being tortured by this thing, the blades of Thrito and Vulth Suidarl, the giant fly. Yeah, their problems right now are very singular. They're not worried too much about, the world or the state of their neighbors or anything like that. Like, they have a very personal problem at this moment. And so having the song condensed down into a smaller idea does sell that idea, the scope of our narrator. presumably our narrator. The scope of the person we're paying attention to is tiny and it fits what's going on here. But it does leave a lot of room for the imagination to kind of fill in some blanks, because maybe other people who are used to lower fidelity stuff can find more nuance to this, but I didn't. I had a hard time really hearing much beyond some chords and some noises. And that's, well, I guess that brings us to the next set. This is a very atmospheric driven track. There's not a lot of riffage going on in here. It's a lot of, well, actually a lot of play a chord on a rhythm. Sometimes we'll change the chord, sometimes we won't. Some screaming on top of that, and very straightforward drum work. If there's a bass in there, it's completely tucked under the mix, falling in the shadow of a guitar or a bass kick or something. It is really about building this heavy, dense, compressed atmosphere to drive this feeling of a weight pressing down on the listener. And for, I think, really the vocals, especially in those higher pitched screams, to cut through that noise and have their wailing be a key part of the experience. Everything else kind of muddies out the low end and it's kind of difficult to discern things, but that vocal, you can always hear it. If it's center, if it's left panned, you can hear it. It's cutting through everything. And so we have this ominous, oppressive, heavy atmosphere with screaming in it. I mean, that's really everything that's going on this track, and it works. Like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, I mean, it sells the idea. But then there's another instrument in here, two other instruments, kind of. There is something that sounds to me like a string instrument picked with an incredibly inflexible pick. And there's an interesting twanginess to the instrument too. It immediately made me think of, is it the shamisen? Japanese lute style instrument with a wooden pick. It basically has no give to it, so it has a really sharp attack to the instrument. I think it is the shamisen. That's what I thought of, and it made me wonder where this band actually comes from. Is this an Asian metal band that introduces some of their, cultural instrumentation into it? I don't know. I'll look into that when I look up the lyrics. But it was an instrument I wasn't expecting, especially being acoustic, given the metaliness of everything going on here. And then we got a couple of sections with that, and then a couple of sections without anything extra, and then the drone buzzing sounds just existing alongside the riffs and the drum patterns and the screaming. More atmospheric stuff. It fills out the sounds more than it contributes harmonically to anything, but it also is, well, I'll be completely honest here, annoying. I don't like drone much anyways. If it's a drone like synth idea underneath a song to fill out some space, I'm cool with that. This is very high up in the mix, very much in the spotlight, and it's just a buzzing. And buzzing is not a sound I'm a big fan of to begin with. I'm going to be completely honest here, dude. This started to sound like a personal hell for me. I think they did a great job combining this idea of someone being tortured and then torturing the listener. Now, not everyone's going to be in that position, so I don't know if that's the intention here, but I certainly felt like my ears were being tortured with all of that buzzing happening in the final 2 minutes or so. Really did a great job of placing me in the shoes of our person whose flesh is being pierced by the blades of Trinita and their eyes devoured by Vulth Suidarl, the giant fly. I love the title, dude. It's so extra. And you just got to put like that extra grit on it when you say it. I will probably say it 2 more times this video just because it's kind of fun to say, dude. Also, the title of this album is Ghostigmata, which is just bonkers. Spiritual Rites of the Psychopomp Absalom. And so it's like Absalom, but with an X instead of an S. Yeah, dude, that's wild too. Ghostigmata. What in the mid-2000s PG-13 horror flick title is that? That's so good. When did this album come out? Oh, 2025. Okay, I was kind of expecting something a bit older. This is brand new, September even, brand new. I don't know what else I can say about this. There's not a lot to really dig in musically. This is more of an experience. This is sonic art, which is kind of weird to make that distinct. What is music? What is sonic art? But like, there's just not a lot to dig into from like a technical perspective. There's not like dense chordal work in here. The melodies are kind of non-existent for 70% of it. It really does use sound to build out a visual representation or a sonic representation of something visual, someone being murdered and their flesh pierced by the blood. And I won't do it again. It does a good job at that, but from a song perspective, it's not a really powerful song, and it does require a lot of buy-in to enjoy it, at least for what I assume is the intended perspective on it. Let me dive into some lyrics here, see what's going on there. All right, first off, looks like it's a one-man band from France. Not the country I was expecting, given that acoustic instrument in here, but really interesting nonetheless. Now, there's no lyrics at all on the internet. Not even Metal Archives has lyrics. This might be one of those situations where the band, or in this case, the artist, just doesn't really care for people to know what they're saying. Yeah, I don't see this too often in more mainstream sounds, mainstream artists, but in the world of black metal, it's still a bit on the rarer side. But there's frequent times when the lyrics just are not posted anywhere, not in liner notes, not in insert flaps. I don't know where Metal Archives get theirs, but they seem to have lyrics that nobody else has, and not even they have it. And it's impossible to really decipher sonically. I don't think anyone could make out the lyrics on this. So I think it's just one of those situations where the artist is happy with it being more of a sonic idea than bringing any sort of verbiage, language into the equation. So I guess that's going to wrap up this reaction. These are my thoughts on Flesh Pierced by the Blades of Triniton, Eyes Devoured by Vulth Suidarl, the Giant Fly. What do you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Are you feeling the ghost stigmata? Put all that and anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation down into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.